going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle that is at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Friday, December the 15th, 2017. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the year, and there's 5 graded stakes races happening at Gulfstream Park tomorrow afternoon. But other than that, things are kind of on the quiet side. And knowing that next weekend is the weekend before Christmas and then the following weekend is the weekend of New Year's, we're kind of in that limbo period where next week we'll touch on a little bit of Santa Anita opening day, which is obviously always the day after Christmas. But then the following week, it's just going to be with the holidays and whatnot. I figured now is probably the best time to do the show that I wanted to do, kind of to button up the entire year, and that is the top 10 performances, in my estimation, of the entire 2017 calendar year. If you listen to this show in the podcast version, you've got YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and video.drf.com. So there won't be any handicapping here this week. There won't be any picks. There won't be any plays. There won't be any NFL. I unfortunately wasn't feeling well last Friday. Guess what? Picks weren't any better. I would have been 2-1, and that would have been it. Would have had no chance. So I failed. I failed this year. Football's in the books. Losing season. But like I said, let's just transition into the top 10 that I thought anyway. And again, feel free to fire away at me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. If you agree, disagree, feel somewhere in between on any of these performances, and maybe I just have them ordered incorrectly, or you just think there's a race or a performance that I omitted and should have been included in this top 10. So let's start off with number 10. I thought this was sort of a coming out party for this one horse in particular, where the headliner was Arrogate, coming in off the bench off of a terrible effort in the San Diego Handicap, and he was going to have him screwed on tight because there was another Bob Baffert runner in there named Collected, and this to me was his coming out party, the Pacific Classic.
Accelerate went a little wide into the turn. Arrogate now is plugging away on the outside. An eighth of a mile to go, and Collected keeps on going. Arrogate is getting going late now. Collected is in front. Arrogate closing on the outside. It's a Bob Baffert 1-2, but Collected going to win it. Collected and Martin Garcia won the Pacific Classic.
Effort right there answered a lot of questions about Collected. He had been winning in very impressive fashion, but he had yet to beat anyone of big sort of stature, and obviously Arrogate at the time was the biggest skin of them all. He handled him pretty easily. At 1.25 miles, that wasn't going to be a problem for him. Del Mar, which had always kind of been the question throughout the course of the summer and leading into the Breeders' Cup for a number of horses, he checked that off. There was no issues with this horse leading into a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic, and this was really the effort that stamped him as a potential sort of contender, as a horse that maybe you would hear from again later on in the year. I thought it was a phenomenal effort from Collected, winning the Pacific Classic. We go on to number 9, and it's a 3-year-old filly, and this was that time of year where we lost Unique Bella because she was sick and she had her shins, and unfortunately she wasn't going to run in the Santa Anita Oaks, and then she wasn't going to go on to the Kentucky Oaks, so it was kind of up in the air. You had Abel Tasman, and we know what she ultimately turned into. She had a phenomenal 3-year-old campaign, but the one 3-year-old filly effort that was just otherworldly, and I still maintain probably right up there with the best 3-year-old performances, period, either sex, any time of the year, any distance. Paradise Woods, her coming out party was indeed the Santa Anita Oaks.
Well, and Abel Tasman on the extreme outside, getting forced very wide, 8 lengths off the lead. Paradise Woods has slipped away by 6 lengths. The others are in a line at the 8th pole, with Abel Tasman running home fairly well into second. But the masterful Mandela has produced Paradise Woods at start number 3 to a dazzling victory in the Santa Anita Oaks. She wins by a dozen lengths.
I know she was on the front. She did it all her own way. There wasn't much of a pace signed on in there. It was just her kind of winging it out there. But good horses, they can humble the field, and that's exactly what she did. She won by over 10 lengths in that spot, and it just, maybe that was the best race of her career. Maybe that will be the best race of her career going forward, however long she runs. I believe she breezed 3/4 mile earlier today for Richard Mandela, but I feel like that's the sort of effort that separates the good horses from the great horses, or potentially great horses. She's not a great horse right now, but from a talent standpoint, I think she's as talented as any other filly or mare in that entire division. She ran fine enough in the Breeders' Cup Distaff to run 3rd, But I think if she moves forward, I think she could have a giant year coming up here in 2018 as a 4-year-old. Paradise Woods, what else is there to say? That effort spoke for itself in the Santa Anita Oaks. Number 8 for me just happened a few weeks ago, and it was up here at Aqueduct. It was the final Grade 1 of the year, and it was an instance for a horse that, whatever you feel about the connections, the horse has been nothing short of rock solid and just as honest as it gets. And it was a matter of time before Sharp Azteca finally got that Grade 1 victory, and he accomplished that feat in the Cigar Mile.
Of the lead as they come off the turn and enter the stretch, and here is Sharp Azteca now to take the lead, 3/4 up in 1:10 Mind Your Biscuits is putting in a run on the outside, and now there's a furlong to the finish. It's Sharp Azteca with the lead, Mind Your Biscuits into second. As they come down for the finish, it's Sharp Azteca, and he was sharp as can be today to win the Cigar Mile. Won it by 5. Mind Your Biscuits was second.
It was a fantastic effort right there for the Jorge Navarro trained Sharp Azteca. Again, it was a matter of time before this horse got that Grade 1 victory. He had run too well in so many different instances, so many different occasions to not have a Grade 1 to his name. And again, whatever your feelings are about Jorge Navarro and the connections involved, it's hard to argue with a horse that just shows up, runs his race, runs his eyeballs out each and every time. And unfortunately for him, he just ran into a couple of good ones throughout the course of his career, whether it's the Breeders' Cup or whether it's the Met Mile or whether it's a couple other instances. He really ran pretty tremendously the entire year, and he ran another bang-up race there in the Cigar Mile, finally getting that Grade 1 that he needed so badly. Now we're going to take what I think might be the most surprising name out of all these names that you're going to see in this top 10 list. And guess what? Pretty soon you're going to have a couple of repeat names, and you probably know where I'm going with that. But this one was completely out of left field. This is a horse that Dan Illman and I have always thought was a good horse, but I don't think anyone in their right mind thought that Bullard's Alley at some point in his career would run off the screen the way that he did in the Canadian International. I know it was run on a bog, and maybe some of the other horses hated it. This horse ran each and every step. This was an unbelievable, eye-popping performance, and guess what? It's the only turf race that I have as far as my sort of top 10 is concerned for the entire year. This is Bullard's Alley decimating a field up at Woodbine.
On the outside, top of the home stretch, and Bullard's Alley first for the judge. Down the center, Oscar nominated. Eruptus making ground, Messi hard at it, and trying to get a run is Flamboyant. Bullard's Alley stole a march on them. Bullard's Alley's 5 in front. Oscar nominated in second, then Erupt, Idaho making ground, and they have inside the final furlong no hope of catching Bullard's Alley. Bullard's Alley has just dominated the Patterson Canadian International, and waltzes in, scores by 9 lengths.
And he was 42-1. That wasn't a 1-9 shot that was doing. That was a 42-1 shot that obviously there was just circumstances that led to that performance. But guess what? He didn't run badly in the Breeders' Cup Turf. I think it's just one of those instances where he's probably not this notch here. He's probably a notch or 2 or 3 below. But when you give him that kind of perfect storm, no pun intended, my goodness, he loves that kind of cut in the ground, and while so many other horses really despise it or have a hard time getting over it, he just skipped over it. That was a giant performance. It's the only turf race that I have, and I prefer turf racing over dirt racing, but it's the only turf race that I have as far as my top 10 performances of the year are concerned. Bullard's Alley in the Canadian International, just an outrageous performance and a phenomenal race right there. And you heard a Beyer speed figure, I believe in the 115, 114 range, so all around really good effort there. Now you're going to start getting to the names that we kind of expect to see on these top 10 sort of lists if you're just looking at from a performance standpoint. Number 6 is a horse called Gunrunner, who we've heard of many times. He's the best horse in the world. He's the best horse in training. Hopefully we see him again in about, 6 weeks now down at Gulfstream Park in the Pegasus World Cup. That would be his send-off, his final race before he goes off to stand at stud. The beginning of things for this horse started down at Oaklawn, where he ran so well, and then he went to Dubai and he ran so well, and then he came back and he ran so well in Stephen Foster. But I think the one that really got everyone's attention, that this might be a serious horse and he might be able to run with Arrogate, was the Whitney. This is Gunrunner's run up in the Whitney at Saratoga.
Home in the Whitney. In front by 2. On the outside, Breaking Lucky is second. Keen Ice has made his way up into third, but he's still far behind. And now Florent Giroux lets Gunrunner go, and he's opened up a 4-length lead. Breaking Lucky is second. Keen Ice on the outside is third as they come to the line. Gunrunner wins the Whitney.
And he did all that with a horseshoe in his tail. which was even more impressive. But that was kind of, to me anyway, the race that signified that this horse, he's continuing to improve, and potentially, if you see that Arrogate takes a step or two backward, maybe that's enough to close the gap. Maybe it's enough to not only close the gap, but put Gunrunner ahead of Arrogate. We would find out later in the year that was indeed the case. Gunrunner, a tremendous horse. I fear that he's going to get a little bit lost in the shuffle over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, because we're in a really sweet spot right now with the amount of good horses. With the fillies and mares, it just feels like for the past 6, 7 years, they just keep rolling out one good one after the next. But for the males, you figure, you start with California Chrome, and whether you think he was as talented as some of these other horses or not, the idea is he was the original rags to riches kind of story, where he was kind of, you know, his pedigree was nondescript. There was nothing spectacular about that. Cost $10,000, and then all of a sudden he goes on and does what he does, accomplishes all sorts of good things, wins the Kentucky Derby, wins the Dubai World Cup, runs second in another Dubai World Cup. I think between him, between American Pharoah doing what American Pharoah did, winning the Triple Crown and the Grand Slam and the Breeders' Cup Classic, and then also with the presence of Arrogate with his performances over his career, I wonder if Gunrunner just kind of gets, not lost in the shuffle, but he reminds me possibly of a shared belief where really I think they're probably a couple of the best horses I've seen in my life. And I mean, I know I haven't been in racing as long as many people are following it, as long as many people that are listening to the show, but boy, it feels like those two are every bit as good, if not better, than some of these other names that we've already discussed. But because they just didn't seem to have the major star power, maybe because I don't know why, but I just feel like Gunrunner may get lost in the shuffle a little bit when it's all said and done. But as far as 2017 is concerned, it was the year of Gunrunner, and I think really everything started to go. I know he had that Foster when he got the Grade 1, but the Whitney, that was when I think he stamped himself as a horse to be reckoned with as far as the big horse is concerned, Arrogate going down the road. Number 5, speaking of Arrogate, going way back, almost a year ago now, the inaugural Pegasus World Cup. It was the showdown. It was the rematch between he and California Chrome. Unfortunately, Chrome had the bad outside post, and for one reason or another, he just didn't fire. I believe he had a little bit of a leg issue afterward, but we all knew that was going to be his final race anyways. Arrogate, it was one of those things. Was 9 Furlongs going to be a problem? Was Gulfstream going to be a problem? Bob Baffert never ships to Gulfstream Park. He kind of quieted all those concerns, Arrogate winning the Pegasus World Cup.
And Ghost splits horses for Jose Ortiz, and they're into the stretch, and it's the Breeders' Cup winner. It's Arrogate in front, leading by 3 with 1/8 of a mile to go. Shaman Ghost is trying to get into second. Then Neolithic. Back fourth is Noble Bird, followed by Keen Ice. But what a race! What a sport! What a horse! Arrogate romps in the Pegasus. He won it by 3.5.
Geared down, not really asked for his best, decimates a really, really top-notch field. You saw Shaman Ghost in there. You saw a couple of the Grade 1 winners, I believe. Keen Ice was in that race as well. Arrogate, that was when everyone looked at him and said, he's a special, special talent. He may not have the resume that some of these other sort of more seasoned horses have, but my goodness, we're dealing with a special animal here. And he went on to do some other big things, which you're going to see some of them here as we get more into this sort of top 5 section of the top 10 performances of 2017 here on the Matt Bernier Show. But I just kind of feel like when he was at his best was better than anyone else's best. And that, to me, that signifies the true sort of greatness. I feel like too many people get caught up on accomplishments, most particularly you talk about something like the NFL with these quarterbacks. Because Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl, does that mean that he doesn't deserve to have just some sort of say as far as the greatest of all time kind of conversation is concerned? Because he's got all the other records, and what he did on the field, anybody that watches enough football, you can tell that he was every bit as good as some of these other guys, just unfortunately for one reason or another didn't get the job done and didn't win a Super Bowl. But does that completely mean that he doesn't fit, that he's not, doesn't belong, that he's not worthy of that sort of stature? I kind of feel like Arrogate, because he was like a shooting star. He was very, very short as far as his duration is concerned. What he did in that short amount of time, though, I've never seen anything like it, and I don't know that I ever will see anything like it. And that's including, again, American Pharoah. The beautiful thing about American Pharoah was he showed up and he ran in all the spots that he was supposed to run in as a 3-year-old. And he won almost all of them with the exception of the Travers. But we had a full sort of year from him. Arrogate, if you put it all together, I believe he only started 9 times. I mean, it's not like we had a giant piece of work from this horse. But boy, when he did work, he was unbelievable. He was as good as I've ever seen, and I venture a guess to say I wonder if he's as good as I'll ever see going forward. His best, I think his best was just better than anyone else's, simply put. We'll get back to Arrogate in a little bit. Number 4 on the list for me is a horse called More Spirit, and we haven't seen More Spirit, the good More Spirit anyway. We only saw him one time after the Metropolitan Handicap. That was in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I'm going to give him a pass for that, draw a line through that race. His run in the Met Mile was impressive, and that was the day that Bob Baffert won everything at Belmont Park. This is More Spirit putting the boots to a really good field in the Met Mile.
And More Spirit has taken the lead at the top of the stretch. 3/4 in 1:10.1, and it is More Spirit pulling away from Sharp Azteca. Tommy Macho is third. Awesome Slew is taken fourth on the far outside. This is just an unbelievable day for Bob Baffert and Mike Smith. They are unstoppable. More Spirit has dominated the Met Mile. He won it by 7 lengths.
When you consider the horse that he just destroyed on the front end was Sharp Azteca, and I've already talked about how impressive I think Sharp Azteca is and where he belongs, where he deserves to be, that was every bit as good as some of these other performances. You could make the argument that that should be even higher on the list as opposed to number 4. Maybe it's number 3, maybe it's number 2. Probably not number 1, but all things considered, it was a giant race. And I do wonder if, we talked about it a little bit with Arrogate, and we will talk about it again here momentarily, the idea that maybe when they just go to 10,000 RPMs, does it take a little bit out of them? Do they just not come back the way that they were before? And I wonder if that's the case with More Spirit. You hear Bob Baffert say it's a head problem with him now. It's nothing physical. He just, his mind isn't right. He didn't run well at all in the Breeders' Cup. You saw Arrogate after the Dubai race, just not the same horse. I wonder if, do you hit 10,000 RPMs on the tachometer and all of a sudden, that's it. All of a sudden you can only get up to 8,500 RPMs now as opposed to just consistently running at that 9,000 just at the red line, but not blowing the engine. I wonder if we got to that point with More Spirit. We'll find out. It sounds like he's going to stay in training, but there were so many other big prizes that it would have been awesome to see. Could he have run with Gunrunner in a race like the Whitney? Could he have run with Gunrunner in a race like the Woodward? We'll never know. And we'll hopefully find out if he comes back as a 5-year-old and he can put it all back together, because you can clearly see with an effort like that in the Met Mile, the talent was there. Now it's just a matter of, can you get him back to where he once was? Number 3 on this list is Gunrunner. Shocking, I know. Gunrunner's name's going to show up again here before it's all said and done. Gunrunner's effort in the Woodward, the only reason that I have this race number 3 as opposed to number 2 is because the field that he beat wasn't phenomenal. It was just one of those instances where I look at it and say, he did what he was supposed to do, but it shouldn't be held against him that the field that he beat was a little bit lackluster, because the way that he did it was as impressive as any other race of any other horse in 2017. This is him up at Saratoga again, one of his favorite tracks. This is Gunrunner in the Woodward.
Top of the stretch in the Woodward. Neolithic put to a full-out drive, and then comes Rally Cry and War Story on the outside, but it's Gunrunner, and he's opening up. Florent Giroux took a peek to his left there. Gunrunner's got a 6-length lead in mid-stretch. Neolithic is next, then Rally Cry, Discreet Lover, and War Story, but they're way behind Gunrunner. Gunrunner, very impressive in the Woodward. He won it by 8 lengths over Rally Crying and Neolithic.
I mean, it was a devastating performance. There's really no other way to put it. And the thing that was so impressive about it, he sat a little bit that day, sat just off of fast fractions, took over at ease, just as willingly as can be. Florent Giroux doesn't have to ask him for a step, and he goes off and he buries that field. He's making Grade 1 company look like a bunch of Grade 2 and Grade 3 horses. Maybe in that instance they were Grade 2 and Grade 3 horses, but what he had done throughout the course of 2017, again, it's a really remarkable thing, and I love seeing what happens when you allow the horses to mature, not only mentally but physically, because this horse as a 3-year-old was really good, but he wasn't a superstar. He could easily have been had in a number, and he was in a number of different scenarios. And as a 4-year-old, he just seemed to find that peak maturity and that peak sort of level of whatever you want to call it. He put it all together, and you saw what the final product was. It was a horse that was as dangerous as any we've seen over the past handful of years, and that leads into the number 2 performance for me as far as the top 10 is concerned for 2017, and that's the Breeders' Cup Classic. It was the coronation. It was the ultimate sort of you know, unseating of one person from the throne and anointing the next one. You know, you talk about it, you see it in boxing, or you see it in MMA, in the UFC, where, you know what, you've got the title holder, and then you've got the #1 contender, and everybody thinks that it's still the champs until he loses the crown. Well, guess what? This was the race where he put it all to bed. Gunrunner took over and said, I'm the king now. This is him winning the Breeders' Cup Classic.
And right up alongside, it looks like we're in for a classic in the Classic. An 1/8 of a mile to go. Gunrunner digs deep, he finds more Collected. West Coast running on third, but Gunrunner the advantage. And Gunrunner is starting to draw clear the final 16. And Gunrunner, a superb performance in the Classic. Gunrunner won it by about 2.5 in the end. Collected a very game second.
Now, you heard Trevor Denman say wins by about 2.5, and I suppose you can look at it and say, well, if you're looking just from a brilliant standpoint, why isn't the Woodward #2 when he wins by the length of the stretch in a Grade 1 race up at Saratoga, but that race is #2? I look at it and say the only reason that I did that is because I think he beat a heck of a lot better field in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He did it across the country on the West Coast at Del Mar, which was a surface that some horses liked and some horses hated. And he did it at 1.25 miles, which was still, for me anyway, a little bit of a concern. I didn't know if 1.25 miles he would be as effective as he was at 9 furlongs. That 10th furlong, not a problem. If anything, he actually put distance between he and Collected. Collected, I could have easily put Collected in there. That could have sort of been another, let's just call it 10B. Where Collected's effort was a giant race in the Breeders' Cup Classic. The problem is he just got beat on the square by a better horse that day. It was a great effort all around from Collected, but he was no match for the best horse in the world, the best horse in training right now. That's Gunrunner, Steve Asmussen, Florent Geroux, everyone involved. He's the best horse, period, and it'll be nice, knock on wood, everything goes well, and he gets down to Gulfstream in good order, and we can see him go out on a winning note, or at least go out with one of his best performances in the Pegasus World Cup. Gunrunner, without question, is the horse of the year, and he shows up on this list more than anyone else. So I suppose you can say overall body of work, he had the most brilliant performances in 2017 as well. But he doesn't have, for my money, the most impressive effort of 2017. And I don't know that I'm ever going to see a race that I think is more impressive than the Dubai World Cup from 2017 with Arrogate, where it was a scenario where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And he still was able to overcome it all across the world against really good horses. Keep in mind, the horse that he just blows the doors off of is Gunrunner. And maybe if you want to say that Gunrunner hadn't turned into Gunrunner at this point, maybe. I think this was one of those scenarios where Arrogate's best. I think maybe it's going to be a little bit closer as they get down the lane in 2017. But if we had gotten Arrogate's best, I just simply think his best is better than Gunrunner's best. The problem is he didn't sustain that greatness. He didn't sustain that best sort of level. But when he was at his best, my goodness, it was a thing to behold. This is the most impressive race I've ever seen. This is the 2017 Dubai World Cup from Arrogate.
And he run them down. He's got to sustain a huge run at the 400. Gunrunner's 2 lengths clear from the Elliptic. Arrogate's coming home down the outside. Gunrunner in front. Arrogate's picking him up on the outer though. Arrogate surged to the lead from Gunrunner. The world's best horse. The Breeders' Cup World Champion. The Pegasus World Cup winner. The world's richest ever horse in 8 starts. The $10 million Group 1 Emirates Airline Dubai World Cup goes to Arrogate.
On what is always a bit of a speed-friendly racetrack over in Meydan, he misses the break. The horse that he needs to beat, Gunrunner, sits the perfect trip. Gunrunner runs every step of the way. You see that there was a mile between him and third. And this horse, Arrogate, just loops the field. And Mike Smith said afterward, he goes, I kind of felt like I was on Zenyatta again. Just make that one run, keep her out in the clear, let her go. He buried the horses. I still maintain, and unfortunately, the way that he finished, it's going to blemish his overall sort of legacy. Let's just say maybe he's not as, in the grand scheme of things, he's not going to be thought of as one of the all-time greats, I don't think. Whether I agree with that or not doesn't matter. I just think the fact of the matter is he finished as poorly as he did those final 3 races. And I say poorly, the Pacific Classic wasn't a bad race, but it wasn't Arrogate. His best, I maintain, is the best I've ever seen. Better than American Pharoah's best, better than California Chrome's best, better than Shared Belief's best, better than you name it, whomever it is. Zenyatta, Blame, Rachel, whomever. Arrogate's best, I think, is better than anyone else, any other horse I've ever seen. Maybe with the exception of Frankel, but I don't really know that, just simply because we're talking apples to oranges, turf to dirt. But that Arrogate right there in the Dubai World Cup, I don't know that I'm ever going to see a race that is as impressive as that effort was, considering everything that went into it. Arrogate, the #1 performance of the year for me, in my opinion, in 2017. For those of you that are watching this live, it's about 25 after 12 here on the East Coast. It's 25 after 9 on the West Coast. If you're watching live, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle at DRF Inside Post, or the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you listen to this thing podcast version, which most of you do, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. We will be back here on Tuesday. You can see the recap show. We'll go over the 5 graded stakes races from Gulfstream Park, and we'll go over the weekend's best as far as Beyer speed figures are concerned. We'll do all that at noon Eastern. Before that, at 11 o'clock Eastern, the DRF Players podcast will be on. Peter Thomas Fornatel, Jonathan Kinchin, and they'll get you up to speed with some different things here and there. And again, that will lead into this show, the review show of the Matt Bernier Show. That'll be at noon on Tuesday. Next Friday, we'll have a little bit of a preview leading into the Christmas weekend. We'll get ready for Santa Anita opening day, the day after Christmas. And then this show that you just watched is going to be replayed on the 29th of December. This is going to be kind of 2 for 1 in here. And again, if you liked it, great. If not, it is what it is. But just feel like it's a good way to wrap everything up, and this was the perfect time, I thought, for us to do this show. Again, if you agree, disagree, think otherwise, think I missed someone, let me know at Bernier_Matt on Twitter. My top 10 performances of 2017. If you are playing at home this weekend, good luck. If you're playing at the track or at the OTB, whatever it may be, if you're playing Gulfstream, diving in deep, if you want to check out those stakes previews, you got all those over at video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forms YouTube channel. And other than that, I think we're good to go here. Best of luck the rest of the way. And as we always do here on Fridays on the Matt Bernier Show, we lead you right into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. Good luck this weekend.